It's often all you can give your mother. There's little ceramic, useless ceramic holders without the handle on them is another thing, because you're not smart enough to do the handle part. And those, I understand mothers have told me, those are known as lanyard holders. That's where the lanyard goes. Now I read two rather short poems. One is called Surprise. It's kind of based on something you hear now and then on the radio. Surprise. This, according to the voice on the radio, the host of a classical music program, no less, this is the birthday of Vivaldi. He would be 325 years old today, quite bent over, I would imagine, and not able to see much through his watery eyes. Surely he would be deaf by now, the clothes flaking off him, hair pitiably sparse. But we would throw a party for him anyway, a surprise party, where everyone would hide behind the furniture to listen for the tap of his cane on the pavement and the sound of his dry, persistent cough. And this one is shorter still. Philip Larkin said that he took no pleasure in going to poetry readings because he could never tell when the poem was going to end. Because if you have the poem in your hand, you can see the end coming and make emotional preparations. But this poem is so short, you should probably start getting ready now. It's just 8 lines long. It's called No Time. In a rush this weekday morning, I tap the horn as I speed past the cemetery where my parents lie buried side by side beneath a smooth slab of granite. Then, all day long, I think of him rising up to give me that look of knowing disapproval while my mother calmly tells him to lie back down. I think sometimes the poet's relationship to the world is almost as simple as someone with a sketchbook, and you just want to get the line of the thing down. And this poem was written very quickly and pretty much tried not to change what I saw, except at the end maybe. It's called Love. The boy at the far end of the train car kept looking behind him as if he were afraid or expecting someone. And then she appeared in the glass door of the forward car, and he rose and opened the door and let her in. And she entered the car carrying a large black case in the unmistakable shape of a cello. She looked like an angel with a high forehead and somber eyes, and her hair was tied up behind her neck with a black bow. And because of all that, he seemed a little awkward in his happiness to see her, whereas she was simply there, perfectly existing as a creature with a soft face who played the cello. And the reason I am writing this on the back of a manila envelope, now that they have left the train together, is to tell you that when she turned to lift the large, delicate cello onto the overhead rack, I saw him looking up at her and what she was doing, the way the eyes of saints are painted when they are looking up at God, when he is doing something remarkable, something that identifies him as God. This is a poem in which it's called Litany, and I just stole the lines from someone else's poem. The first 2 lines of this man's poem, he wrote, his poem begins, "You are the bread and the knife, the crystal goblet and the wine," and the poem pretty much goes on in that vein. It's a love poem, as you can tell. And I just thought I'd just do it my way, so I took his lines and restarted the poem, and it's called Litany. You are the bread and the knife, the crystal goblet and the wine. You are the dew on the morning grass and the burning wheel of the sun. You are the white apron of the baker and the marsh bird suddenly in flight. However, you are not the wind in the orchard, the plums on the counter, or the house of cards. And you are certainly not the pine-scented air. There is no way you are the pine-scented air. It is possible that you are the fish under the bridge, maybe even the pigeon on the general's head, but you are not even close to being the field of cornflowers at dusk. And a quick look in the mirror will show that you are neither the boots in the corner nor the boat asleep in its boathouse. It might interest you to know, speaking of the plentiful imagery of the world, that I am the sound of rain on the roof. I also happen to be the shooting star, the evening paper blowing down an alley, and the basket of chestnuts on the kitchen table. I am also the moon in the trees and the blind woman's teacup. But don't worry, I am not the bread and the knife. You are still the bread and the knife. You will always be the bread and the knife, not to mention the crystal goblet and somehow the wine. Thank you. Thank you. I started this poem started out as just a way of acknowledging what happened when the fashion of men wearing hats in cities stopped sometime in the 60s. And it's just called The Death of the Hat. Once, every man wore a hat. In the ashen newsreels, the avenues of cities are broad rivers flowing with hats. The ballparks swelled with thousands of straw hats, brims and bands, rows of men smoking and cheering in shirt sleeves. Hats were the law. They went without saying. You noticed a man in a crowd without a hat. You bought them from Adams or Dobbs, who branded your initials in gold on the inside band. Trolleys crisscrossed the city. Steamships sailed in and out of the harbor. Men with hats gathered on the docks. There was a person to block your hat and a hat-check girl to mind it while you had a drink or ate a steak with peas and a baked potato. In your office stood a hat rack. The day war was declared, everyone in the street was wearing a hat, and they were wearing hats when a ship loaded with men and women sank in the icy sea. My father wore one to work every day and returned home carrying the evening paper, the winter chill radiating from his overcoat. But today we go bareheaded into the winter streets, stand hatless on frozen platforms. Today the mailboxes on the roadside and the spruce trees behind the house wear cold white hats of snow. Mice scurry from the stone walls at night in their thin fur hats to eat the birdseed that has spilled. And now my father, after a life of work, wears a hat of earth, and on top of that, a lighter one of cloud and sky, a hat of wind. Thank you. I sense a little uncertainty on your part. That's a perfectly legitimate reaction.